Okay, Mayor John Tory is making another budget announcement after discussing more investments in policing and, of course, the TTC over the last 2 days. Let's listen in live.
To work on maintaining our strong credit rating, which has been reaffirmed several times in recent years by the credit rating agencies. So as we're continuing to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, there are continuing costs arising from the pandemic, especially when it comes to transit and shelters, impacts well beyond those faced by any other city in the country. And that's because of the size of our city, it's because of the complexity and size of our transit and shelter systems, and that size and complexity, I would argue, without much fear of contradiction, is not fully recognized as it should be when programs are fashioned to assist cities with the costs associated with some of these issues. I continue to believe very strongly that it is fair and financially sensible for the other governments to assist us with these entirely COVID-related financial challenges. And while we have received billions from these governments over 3 pandemic years, including a recent commitment for 2022 from the province of Ontario, keeping the country's economic engine in the best shape to recover will require continued, though diminished, investment by those governments, something that I'm working on continuously. So my focus, as I've worked with Councillor Crawford and with our staff and with Deputy Mayor McKelvey and with Councillor Bradford, has been on the city's proposed operating and capital budgets, with the main focus being to protect the services we need right now, to maximize the investments we make in those services, but also at the same time respecting the affordability challenges being faced by Torontonians and continuing to look for savings and efficiencies wherever we can. Many of these budget commitments I've been speaking about honor pledges that I made and many of my colleagues made during the course of the recent election campaign, in respect of which those of us who are here received a mandate from voters, in my case, across the city. So now I'm following through on those commitments. These frontline nuts and bolts services are the services our residents expect to be delivered and protected, and I've remained focused on that alongside Councillor Crawford throughout. Accordingly, the proposed budget will make significant investments in housing, including Toronto community housing, as well as COVID-19 impacts. There are almost $2 billion in gross spending arrangements in the budget that will be contained in the proposed budget on housing initiatives. Excluding ongoing COVID-19 expenses, there will be in 2023 in the proposed budget $616 million in direct tax support from the property tax base invested in city housing initiatives. This is needed funding to help our most vulnerable residents and to help people find a pathway out of homelessness. This budget invests more city tax funding in TCHC to help manage their operating shortfall, largely due to COVID-19, and to maintain a fully funded state of good repair budget of $350 million this year. And I'll stop on that because there were many years before I was mayor and before we had this approach to TCHC when there was either moving target numbers or no numbers specifically allocated to TCHC repairs. And thanks to the fact we have a partnership with the Government of Canada on this, and that we put in place a program to make sure each year there was an amount that TCHC could count on, including contributions from the city, we're able to have a fully funded repair budget of $350 million for this year. The budget, the proposed budget, will also include another $1 million for the Eviction Prevention Intervention in the Community program, also known as the EPIC program. This is a 17% increase over 2022 and will bring the total budget to more than $7 million. The budget has set aside, in its proposed form, almost $19 million for the multi-unit residential acquisition program. This is a program introduced by me as mayor and approved by the council to help preserve the city's rental housing stock by acquiring multi-unit residential properties that might be at risk. We cannot do all these things alone. I don't mean to suggest up here, notwithstanding the substantial contribution, which includes, by the way, in our 10-year capital plan, $9.8 billion for housing in the capital plan for the next 10 years. We can't do this alone. We need, in order to address what is a housing crisis, to have the continued partnership of the other governments when it comes to housing. The city is doing more than its fair share, and we will continue to do so in this proposed budget. Some of these increases are significant in percentage terms in a year of excruciating financial challenges, and it should be noted that we did allocate funding for these increases and did not cut these programs in difficult times. Housing is part of the nuts and bolts services that major big cities provide, though it should be noted that due to past downloading, the City of Toronto and other Ontario cities bear a disproportionate share of the responsibility for housing-related expenses compared to any other cities, big or small, in Canada. To continue the work we do to help people experiencing homelessness, this proposed budget continues to fund the previously committed additional central intake staff, housing councillors, and street outreach workers. Along with our housing efforts, as you know, the City is working to help more housing get built as quickly as possible. And that is why the City Council overwhelmingly approved my Housing Action Plan at the previous meeting. And why we moved as well at the same time to legalize multi-tenant housing. And you should know that this proposed budget will also include around $3.5 million to ensure that we do the work so the city is ready to implement that program on schedule and make sure that people living in rooming houses are safe. And as you know, there was an extensive part of that approval that included the hiring of more people in the licensing area and inspection area and other kinds of expenditures to get ready to regulate and keep safe rooming houses across the city. We know that this will have an important impact.
We've been listening live to Mayor John Tory making a housing investment announcement as part of the 2023 budget, saying that $16 and $16 million of direct support from the city's tax base is going to some housing initiatives, including new funds for legalizing multi-tenant housing. That will be $19 million, housing development and support for tenants as well. Tory also proposing investments to improve and protect city services like rec centers, outdoor pools and seasonal parks.